Fatal Frame, also known as Project Zero in Europe and Zero in Japan, is a survival horror game released in 2001 on the PS2 and Xbox. The game is set in 1980s rural Japan and revolves around a 17-year-old girl called Miku, who goes to the abandoned and apparently haunted Himaru mansion in search of her older brother Mafuyu, who in turn went there in search of Junsei Takamine, a renowned folklorist who also went missing there while gathering research for his book. Once Miku arrives at the location, she realizes that the abandoned building might not be as empty as it seems. You, as the player, will also notice that this game's voice acting is very similar to that of the early Resident Evil and Silent Hill games, being that it's extremely stilted and awkward, which is definitely a detriment to the overall oppressive atmosphere that the game has dropped you into.
I captured a ghost with this camera. This camera has the power to expose things the normal eye can't see.
The second thing you'll notice upon gaining control of Miku is that the control scheme is somewhat unsuited to the fixed camera angles that the game uses. In the aforementioned Resident Evil and Silent Hill games, they use a tank control scheme that allows you to traverse the changing camera angles while easily maintaining the direction you're moving in. However, Fatal Frame uses the analog stick with a more modern omnidirectional control scheme. This is fine when you're running around a large open area, but when switching between camera angles, you'll often find yourself spinning around in circles as you adjust the analog stick to your new direction. There is a way to almost remedy this problem by holding the run button as you switch camera angles, allowing you to continue running in the same direction, but if you're trying to escape an enemy in an enclosed, cluttered space, you'll most likely find yourself doing a quick 180 and running into the cold embrace of your demise. While I do have problems with this control scheme, I do understand its implementation. You need to be able to turn quickly to dodge and aim at fast moving targets, which isn't really possible with the more clunky tank controls. Which brings us onto the topic of enemies and combat. Combat is quite unique in the Fatal Frame series, which is one of the reasons behind its success. In Fatal Frame, you're going to be fighting a plethora of dangerous spirits in order to reach your goal of rescuing Mafuyu, and these spirits can float through the air, teleport around the room, and pass through solid objects, including walls. And what weapon are you given to combat these fearsome foes? A camera. Yep, a camera. Which in retrospect seems more useful in this situation than a shotgun would. Reason being that ghosts are assumedly impervious to physical attacks. This camera isn't just any camera though. It's specially designed to capture photographs of spirits, dubbed the camera obscura in later games. The camera obviously uses film as ammunition, which varies in power. This replaces the need for multiple weapons that increase in power like in other games. The camera is upgradable, allowing you to increase various stats like power or speed, and also allowing you to equip different special abilities which come in the form of camera lenses. These special abilities do things like slowing down enemies or deal large amounts of damage in one shot, and can also be upgraded to make them more powerful using points you gain from defeating enemies. During combat, if you focus your aim on an enemy, a meter will fill up on your HUD which indicates the power of the next shot. Waiting longer will net you a more powerful shot, which is what you're going to want to do if you want to conserve film. You'll also want to wait for a fatal frame, which is when the camera's filter turns from blue to orange, indicating that the enemy is preparing to attack. This is the best time to snap a photo because it deals significantly more damage than a normal shot. The spirits can be categorized into two different types, aggressive and passive. The aggressive spirits are the ones that'll attack you during gameplay. There isn't a huge variety of spirits and you'll be fighting the same ones multiple times throughout the game, but I think that's a positive thing. When you defeat a spirit, it will shrink down into a small orb and either get absorbed by your camera or disperse into the air. If absorbed, you won't be seeing this spirit again. You'll have essentially caught it, Ghostbusters style. But if it disperses, it has escaped and you'll most likely be seeing it again later. The way you fight the same spirits multiple times builds up a kind of rivalry between you and them that you don't get in any other games whose enemies just consist of different beings that all have the same identical skins. In this game you are fighting the same being, the same soul, and it makes it a lot more personal and engaging in my opinion. The passive spirits won't attack you like the aggressive ones will. You can still take photos of them, but instead of doing damage, you'll receive a photo of them to contribute to your ghost list, which is a complete list of spirits that you can snap photos of during the game. These passive spirits can be found in various different forms, including guiding spirits, which gives you a hint on where to go next, hidden spirits, which are usually tucked away in corners all over the mansion and can be snapped for quick points, and spirit barriers, which are basically more of a locked door puzzle than anything else. These passive spirits don't have to be interacted with throughout the game, bar the spirit barriers, and are only there for those who want to rack up some more points or for the more completionist type players. Being a survival horror game, Fatal Frame is of course full of puzzles for the player to solve. Puzzles in this game mostly consist of taking a photo of something locked, being presented with a different location in the photo, and then going to that location to take a photo of a passive spirit to release the lock. There are other more interesting object-based puzzles, but these are the ones you'll encounter most. Unlike the Resident Evil and Silent Hill games, you won't be combining items to solve any puzzles. It's a very simplistic approach which doesn't require much thinking, but I actually don't mind it. I would often find myself lost in the Silent Hill games because the puzzle solutions are so weird and vague, which made me really appreciate the easier puzzles in Fatal Frame. And although the spirit bearers are the weakest puzzles in terms of mechanics, they do offer more in terms of exploration. When you photograph the locked door, you'll be shown a different location, and to get to that location you'll have to use your knowledge of the mansion in order to find it. So that's the combat and puzzles covered. Now on to the story, so puzzles from here onwards. The game opens with Mafuyu's arrival at the mansion, and you'll play the intro as him. You'll follow the remnants of Mr. Takamine through the mansion until eventually befalling an unfortunate fate which results in your disappearance. Enter Miku 2 weeks later, who has come in search of Mafuyu. Upon entering the mansion, she soon finds the camera obscura where we last saw Mafuyu, and also encounters the passive apparitions of Mr. Takamine and his colleagues Ogata and Hirasaka. The first night introduces you to the curse that killed them and focuses on teaching you the game's puzzle, exploration and combat mechanics. It does this very effectively while continuing to deliver on a very solid horror experience. The game uses jump scares very creatively, and they're never too frequent or obnoxious. In fact, you'll often get a jump scare when you least expect it, like when you're in the middle of a door opening animation for example, which is very impressive. This keeps you on your toes and makes you feel like there's really nowhere safe here. After several mini boss fights, including ones against Mr. Takamine's 2 underlings, you fight against the Big Cheese himself. The lead up to this fight is amazing, as it has you make your way up a long steep path to a shrine lined with torii gates and surrounded by a misty dark forest. Strange noises sound out from all around you as you ascend the steps, and it gives a wonderful ominous presence to the shrine. After defeating Mr. Takamine in a very spooky yet kind of annoying fight, you return to the shrine to find a piece of a holy mirror and encounter Kyrie for the first time. Kyrie is the main antagonist of the game and is the reason behind the curse and the mansion being full of trapped spirits. The holy mirror is what you'll need to assemble to defeat her. Kyrie inflicts the same curse on Miku as she did the others, and so begins Miku's quest to not only save her brother from this horrible place, but also herself. The second night begins with Miku seeing a child spirit holding another piece of the mirror, which you'll have to retrieve. The first portion of the night is spent running around the mansion on the hunt for several child spirits, who, when defeated, will reward you with various items needed for progression, including the second piece of the holy mirror. This night also includes my favourite enemy in the game, Blinded, a woman who was used in the blinding ritual, a preceding stage of the strangling ritual, the failure of which caused the calamity, releasing a terrible evil into the mansion and the surrounding area. In the blinding ritual, a woman is blinded with a special mask and then takes part in a game called Kagome Kagome, in which children hold hands and dance around her singing the Kagome Kagome song, which is seen in one of the visions Miku has. The blinded maiden must then catch all the children during the demon tag ritual, and the last one caught is assigned the duty of Rope Shrine Maiden. This process is actually pretty cool, as the first child caught will be designated the next blinded maiden and is considered to have the lowest amount of spiritual power, while the one caught last is considered to have the most because they were able to evade the blinded maiden for the longest. I like how there's so much connectivity within the rituals. It makes it feel really fleshed out. So Blinded, the blind ghost, now wanders the mansion crying in pain and frustration. She's truly a tragic character. Combat with her is a nice mix-up from the usual. Since she is blind, she can't see you, obviously, but she can hear you, so if you try to run away after getting startled by her sudden appearance, she'll hone in on you instantly like the basilisk at the end of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. However, you don't have any rocks to distract her with, so you're forced to steel your nerves and remain stationary so you can line up a powerful shot. It's genuinely great. The rest of this night is spent trying to open a big scary door using the mask that blinded her. After some great puzzle segments using traditional Japanese kabuki masks, you are treated to one of the best mini-boss fights in the game, wherein you face off against Blinded in an extremely tight space. You feel like you need to move around because there's rarely much space between you, but you can't because she'll hear you. It's a great fight that lends itself brilliantly to her combat mechanics. You soon retrieve the Blinded mask and make your way back to the door that'll unlock with it. Here is where you fight Blinded for the final time, which is kind of underwhelming since the location for the last encounter with her was much better suited to her than this one. After opening the door with the mask, you find another piece of the holy mirror and have another encounter with Kyrie, who curses you even more now. The third night is my favourite and entails you travelling to various landmarks throughout the mansion to defeat the family master and his 4 assistant priests to unlock an entrance to caves beneath the mansion. The 4 priests each have different combat styles and are immensely fun to fight. Once they are defeated, you follow a trail of blood to find the family master, who you fight in a long room consisting of 4 open rooms joined together. The setting for this fight is great and also lends itself to his combat style well. He wields a katana, which he'll lunge at you with from a distance. It's a great fight that'll have you trying desperately to distance yourself from him so you can hopefully snap a fatal frame as he comes rushing at you with his blade. After defeating him, you gain access to the passage down to the entrance to the caves, which is where you find the second last piece of the Holy Mirror. Kyrie appears once again and chases you back up to the surface, where you're saved by a friendly child spirit who has been assisting you throughout the game. I find this night very enjoyable. Since you've already unlocked most of the mansion, it's less exploring and more of a gauntlet of bosses. It makes the most out of your knowledge of the mansion's layout to find the priests easily and gives you some of the best boss fights in the game. The final night is where we finally get some more info on Kyrie's character. You discover that the friendly child spirit who has been helping you all this time is actually the good part of Kyrie's soul, the bad part being the spirit who's been murderizing everyone. You also find out the reason why the strangling ritual failed was because Kyrie was not fully committed to her duty as the Rope Shrine Maiden. She had fallen in love with a visitor to the mansion who bears a striking resemblance to Mafuyu and wanted to be with him instead of protecting the world from the malice, a powerful evil force locked away deep under the mansion and is the whole reason for the rituals. During this night you once again encounter Kyrie, but this time instead of being cornered you were able to escape her and return to the cave entrance where she chased you out of previously. The descent through the caves is wildly different from the rest of the environments you encounter in the game, and it really gives a sense of finality to this part. Halfway through the cave system, you find an altar covered with blood and surrounded by rope winches. A vision shows Miku that this is where the Rope Shrine Maidens were sacrificed by pulling them apart with winches and ropes tied to their limbs. Further on through the cave, Miku finally arrives at the Hell Gate, where the malice escaped from. Miku finds Mafuyu here, but Kyrie absorbs him. The only reason he was allowed to live until now was because of his resemblance to her lover, and now she has taken him into herself so that they'll always be together. The final boss fight against Kyrie begins, and it's incredibly underwhelming. She's extremely slow, and other than having the ability to shake your screen with earthquakes, she doesn't really pose much of a threat. After kind of defeating her in combat, the camera obscura will explode, revealing the final holy mirror piece inside. You then grab this and put the reassembled mirror in the altar before Kyrie reaches you. Doing this repels the evil from Kyrie and she and Mafuyu separate. The friendly child Kyrie convinces the other Kyrie to get her shit together and do her duty, so she sacrifices herself to close the Hell Gate and keep the malice at bay. Nice! The cave walls start to fall apart around them, and as Miku goes to leave with Mafuyu, he decides to stay with Kyrie as she holds the gate shut. This is pretty annoying as you've spent the entire game trying to rescue this dude and he decides he doesn't need saving because he'd rather spend the rest of eternity with a hot tied up shrine maiden who is only into him because he looks like her past boyfriend. But whatever. Miku escapes the mansion, leaving Mafuyu behind. She is deeply affected by this and regrets leaving him behind. The final cutscene shows all the souls that were trapped in the mansion rising up to the sky in the form of Hitotama. The scene is actually quite beautiful and is a relieving image to end the game on. Fatal Frame hits all the notes that a good survival horror game should, and delivers a fun, challenging experience that rivals that of the titans of the genre. I think it's more accessible to newcomers to the genre since its puzzles are more forgiving and the combat itself is less clunky. The camera's first-person view will feel more comfortable to players unaccustomed to games using fixed camera angles and will also allow them to get their bearings easier after getting turned around during a fight. The game also leads the player around subtly by using passive spirit apparitions to guide the player in their direction, which may sound very hand-holding, but it's well implemented and doesn't make the game feel linear at all. One thing I love is that almost every object in the game will be given a description by Miku when you interact with it. Getting information on this environment that is so foreign to me really helped me get immersed into the setting and gave the Himuru Mansion a sense of history and authenticity. Another thing I love is how the game gets under your skin. Jump scares are one thing, but when you're searching through a dead quiet room for much needed health items and hear a moan from the nearby corner or see a doll's head fall off its shoulders, it instills a level of fear in you that is barely describable. It's the subtleness of those scares that is truly terrifying. It's almost like you can feel the spirit watching you from the shadows, knowing that it knows it scared you and that it might do it again. I'm actually getting chills just thinking about some of the moments in the game. It's phenomenal. I really do love Fatal Frame. It's not the best game ever, or even the best survival horror game ever, but it does hold a special place in my heart, being the first survival horror game I ever played. It has its flaws for sure, mainly the clunky controls and terrible voice acting and dialogue, but it's definitely worth playing, especially if you're new to the genre of survival horror, and just because it isn't Resident Evil or Silent Hill doesn't mean it's irrelevant. So if you get the chance, be sure to give it a try. It's relatively cheap, especially compared to some of the other Fatal Frame games, and if you're new to horror games, it'll definitely give you a memorable experience that I hope will introduce you to a genre of games you'll come to love just as much as I do. Thanks for watching.